Hey there! Welcome to our channel where we share stories of life in small towns. Today's story comes from the fictional town of Somerville, Ohio, where dusty roads led to red barns and neighbors waved from their porches. When Ethan was 13, he rode in the old minivan with his parents, Mark and Laura, towards his grandparents' farmhouse on the outskirts of town. This summer would be his grandpa Joe's last, and this trip was a mission. Ethan watched as the familiar scene of his childhood unfolded before him, but with a tinge of melancholy. The wooden fence was leaning, and the once bright yellow paint of the house had faded. But it was the sight of the overgrown garden that tugged at his heartstrings. Rows of wilted tomato cages and tangled vines lay hidden amidst the wild growth. This garden had been his haven as a child, and seeing it now, on the verge of being reclaimed by nature, mirrored his feelings about his grandfather's health. His grandpa, 78, was battling his illnesses with quiet dignity, just like he had battled weeds in his garden all those years. As they stepped out of the car, Grandpa Joe shuffled towards them, his gait slow but steady, a faint smile crinkling his eyes. Despite his frailty, there was a strength in his stance that reminded Ethan of the sturdy oak tree in the backyard. His grandpa had planted that tree when he was just a sapling, and now it stood tall, providing shade to the very garden that they were looking at now. "You're taller every time I see you," Grandpa Joe chuckled, ruffling Ethan's hair before coughing gently into his handkerchief. Despite his failing health, his grandpa still had a dry sense of humor, one that Ethan cherished. The interior of the farmhouse had remained unchanged since Ethan's last visit. The scent of lemon furniture, polish, and garden earth hung in the air, mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Family photos adorned the walls, capturing moments in time that showed Grandpa Joe and Grandma Ruth, who had passed away 5 years earlier, smiling in their Sunday best. It was evident that the garden wasn't just a patch of land for Grandpa Joe. It was an extension of his heart. During dinner, as they caught up on each other's lives, Grandpa Joe quietly mentioned how much he missed tending to his garden, his voice heavy with emotion. It was a simple statement, yet it hung in the air like a prayer. Ethan saw the wistful look on his grandfather's face and knew that this wasn't just about missing gardening. It was about missing a connection to the past, to a way of life that had been his solace for so long. As the evening deepened, Ethan sat by the window watching fireflies dance in the twilight. He thought about his grandpa's words and the longing in his eyes. A plan began to form in his mind. He looked at his parents, sharing a silent conversation with them. They understood. The next morning, Ethan awoke before sunrise. He slipped on his muddy sneakers and without waking anyone, he went out to the garden. The air was cool, carrying the promise of a new day. He stood in the middle of the overgrown rows, raking away the dead leaves and debris. The soil was hard, compacted by years of neglect, but beneath the surface, he could feel the life waiting to be awakened. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, casting long shadows across the rows, Grandpa Joe shuffled out onto the porch, leaning on his cane. He saw Ethan and a faint smile touched his lips. He didn't need to say a word. The sight of his grandson tending to the garden filled him with a quiet pride. Over the next few weeks, Ethan's parents joined in. Mark, with his strong arms, tilled the soil using one of Grandpa Joe's old tools. Laura, kneeling beside Ethan, carefully planted seeds that Grandpa had saved in coffee tins over the years. Corn, beans, tomatoes, and zinnias, Grandma Ruth's favorite flowers. Grandpa Joe, though too weak to work the rows, spent his days sitting in a lawn chair under the oak tree, offering gentle instructions and the occasional story. As the garden began to stir to life, the townspeople noticed the activity. Mrs. Evans from across the road brought over homemade lemonade one day, while Mr. Garcia, the retired mechanic, dropped off a new hoe. "Your granddad taught me how to fix an engine when I was your age, kid," he said, his eyes twinkling. Ethan felt the support of the town, the quiet strength of a community that had rallied around a shared love for Grandpa Joe and his garden. One evening, as the sky blazed with colors of burnt umber and crimson, Ethan sat next to Grandpa Joe. The old man leaned heavily on his cane, his eyes fixed on the rows. "This garden," "Ethan, it's more than food. It's family, hope, and faith that something beautiful will grow even when we're gone." His voice, though frail, carried the strength of a life well lived, a life deeply rooted in the soil of this garden. Weeks turned into months, and the once dead garden transformed into a vibrant tapestry of life. Small green shoots peeked through the soil, blossoms burst into tiny fruits, and bees hummed softly in the early morning air. Every morning, Ethan awoke with a sense of purpose. He watered the rows, weeded carefully, and talked to the plants as Grandpa Joe had taught him, believing in the quiet magic of kindness and care. Every day, Grandpa Joe would shuffle out with his cane and sit under the oak, his eyes shining with quiet joy as he watched Ethan work. He shared stories about the first time he and Grandma Ruth planted this garden, their laughter echoing in Ethan's ears as he planted each seed, each row becoming a link in the chain that connected 3 generations. He learned that his grandparents had planted this garden shortly after they bought the farm with saved-up wages from factory work. They had dreamed of a place where they could grow their own food, a place where their children and grandchildren could run barefoot through the rows, learning the language of the soil and the seasons. The garden became the heart of the family's summer. Laura made fresh salads from the lettuces. Mark taught Ethan how to build wooden stakes for the tomatoes, and Grandpa Joe guided them with stories and old wisdom. They shared meals under the oak tree, the air thick with the scent of earth and fresh herbs. Laughter mingled with the sound of crickets as they told stories and jokes, creating memories that would be as enduring as the rows of corn that surrounded them. One Sunday, they held a small picnic in the garden. The air was thick with the scent of earth and fresh herbs. The table was covered in homemade bread, garden vegetables, and a pie that Laura had baked using Grandpa Joe's rhubarb. They laughed, told stories, and listened to the wind rustling through the corn, the garden, becoming a living memory of their love and the generations that had built their lives with soil-stained hands, and hoped that the harvest would come no matter how hard the season. As summer neared its end, Grandpa Joe grew weaker. He spent more time resting on the porch, his gaze often fixed on the garden. One morning, he asked Ethan to wheel his chair down the row, so he could touch the tomatoes, their bright red skin warm from the sun. He held one in his hand, breathing in its scent, tears rolling down his weathered cheeks. "You did it, boy. You made it live again." His voice, though weak, was filled with gratitude and love. That afternoon, neighbors gathered to help harvest. They filled baskets with beans, cucumbers, and tomatoes, sharing laughter and quiet stories of Grandpa Joe's kindness over the years. Together, they had breathed life back into the garden, and now it was giving back, providing nourishment not just for the body, but for the soul. Each person who received a basket from Grandpa Joe's garden felt a connection to the man who had taught them the value of hard work, the sweetness of fresh vegetables, and the quiet dignity of aging. And in the evenings, as the fireflies twinkled in the twilight, Ethan sat with Grandpa Joe on the porch, the garden glowing softly beneath the moonlight. They shared a bond that transcended words, a bond forged in the soil, watered by their shared love for the land and each other. One evening, as the fireflies danced in the twilight, Ethan sat with Grandpa Joe. The old man, his eyes heavy with sleep, took Ethan's hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Promise me you'll keep it going," he whispered. Ethan's throat tightened, and he nodded, tears in his eyes, whispering back, "I promise, Grandpa." When Grandpa Joe passed away that fall, the entire town came to his service, many bringing baskets of vegetables grown from seeds he had given them. They stood in the churchyard, a testament to a life well lived, a life deeply rooted in the soil of this town, in the rows of his garden, and in the hearts of everyone who had ever known him. They had come to honor a man who had taught them that gardens are not just about food, but about faith, family, and leaving something beautiful behind. Each spring after Ethan and his parents returned to plant Grandpa's garden, the soil still warm with the memory of a man who had taught them how to grow love, row by row, season after season, in the heart of small-town America. And that's our story. We hope you enjoyed this journey into small-town life. If you did, don't forget to show your support. Your likes and comments mean the world to us and help bring more stories to more people. So until next time, Keep an eye out for the magic in everyday life. Because in small towns, life is small, sweet, and full of surprises. Thank you for watching. See you next time.